Hi, everyone, and welcome to our discussion about building the future with 5G. I'm Alexandra Bacchus, and I'm part of the Newlab Partnerships team. Many of you might be familiar with our work at Newlab, but others might be encountering us for the first time today. Thank you for joining us. If you learn one thing about us during this discussion, I hope it's the way we are committed to applying transformative technology to things that matter. Today, we'll be discussing how 5G will unlock step changes in industrial automation, healthcare, energy, transportation, to name just a few, in ways previously thought unfathomable. So before I hand it over to Satish to kick off the webinar, I'll run through a few housekeeping notes. Our panelists are looking to field questions from the audience. So to ask a question, please type it out in the chat box, and I will help get those in front of our panelists throughout the conversation. So without further ado, Satish, take it away.
Thank you, Alexandra, and very excited to have everyone here today. I'm Satish Rao, I'm Newlab's Chief Product Officer, and looking forward to spending this hour with you with a very exciting discussion with great panelists. First, want to give a quick intro to Newlab and a partnership we've started with Verizon in our 5G studio. So as Alexandra said, we are Newlab, and we apply technologies to things that matter. And we believe in frontier tech and things that can transform the way industries work and function and ways that can impact society. We operate in areas such as health and humanity, infrastructure and resilience, cities and equity, materials and environment, and media and truth. And we do this in a variety of ways. Ultimately, what we do is we help build and support communities of entrepreneurs and frontier technologists in the form of startups. 150 frontier tech startups are located in our physical space at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And there'll be more about that in a second. This is a picture of our space here in front of you. And this space is built to promote collaboration. And as Newlab, we work hard to support these teams in building partnerships, engaging industry through our pipelines, and developing investment opportunities. More broadly, we engage industry and civic partners in developing solutions to their problem sets by, again, developing communities of frontier tech startups that can apply their platforms to the problem sets that the industry and civic partners bring to bear. And we do this through our studio model. And so ultimately what our studios do is we engage our clients, whether it might be an industry partner or a civic partner representing a community that has significant challenges or problems that can be solved with innovation and sort of great technology. And we do this in a phased approach through a studio model. We perform research and discovery and develop client insights as we engage our partner to understand what their problem sets are. We use those problem sets to recruit technologies and startups that might be building products that are relevant to that space. We support those startups in building prototypes and developing metrics and KPIs and things that they need to do in order to get into the proper mode of validation and ultimately piloting these opportunities, whether it be at our partner sites, the sites of a community, or in this case, which we'll talk about today, the site being Newlab itself. And so a couple months ago, we started a partnership with Verizon, and our partner is here today. We'll speak more about that. Where we're launching a studio around 5G and how we can get 5G to transform certain areas of industry. And ultimately, we'll be doing this similar to what we've done with our other studio model, is to recruit great startups, put them through a process where we can support their prototyping efforts, and ultimately help them pilot technologies on a 5G testbed located at the Brooklyn Navy Yard in our space at Newlab. We have chosen to start with these 4 focus areas. Much of this will be represented today. Today we'll be actually focusing on the top 2, industrial automation, energy, which of course naturally feeds into efficiency and sustainability, all things transportation, and healthcare, such as telemedicine and other forms of digital health. And so today we'll talk about the first 2 topics, but currently we're recruiting teams to work in all 4 of these areas and pilot their technologies at Newlab on the Verizon-built 5G testbed. Here's a great shot of our space located in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. The Navy Yard has a great history of manufacturing and advanced tech. It built a lot of the naval ships for the US during World War I and II. It had about 70,000 employees at peak in the 40s, and it has had sort of a renaissance over the last 10 years. The Navy Yard's a 300-acre campus full of tech companies, manufacturing companies, and Newlab, which is home to several different types of companies ourselves. The Verizon 5G testbed will be installed here at Newlab with indoor coverage, and you can see the building with the Newlab sign, as well as some areas outdoor to be able to pilot technologies around transportation or mobile robotics. And so very exciting opportunities for us to support companies that are looking at installing or enabling 5G transformations to the products they already have in market in ways that allow them to really realize what their technologies can do and perhaps push them into industries that they did not realize before. And so it starts with great partnership, and we have found a great partnership with our friends at Verizon, particularly the new business incubation team. And to that, I'd love to hand it over to Elise Neal, Vice President of the new business incubation team at Verizon.
Well, mad love right back at you, Mr. Satish. We're really excited to be partnered with Newlab, and thanks for allowing us to come and share some of the great work that we're doing here. So for those of you who I don't know, my name is Elise Neal, and I'm the Vice President of New Business Incubation at Verizon. I like to tell people that I have the coolest job in all of Verizon because I have the opportunity to build net new businesses that are software businesses that leverage our 5G future. And so propelling the amazing work that our engineers do on a daily basis to bring the future of 5G kind of to America and beyond, I have the great distinguished pleasure to build those businesses that ride right on top of that unbelievable best America network. So what is 5G? Help me understand kind of, is this just like 4G with like a little bit of extra juju? The answer is no. So for those of you who have not been tracking along, Verizon has launched 5G in areas of about 35 cities here in the United States. We were the very first to launch our 5G network, which we're really excited about. But 5G, again, isn't just 4G, but a little bit faster. We'll talk a little bit today and kind of throughout the body of the presentation and through our dialogue around some of the additional functions that 5G kind of brings to life. Most people just focus on faster speeds or bandwidth and throughput, but there are many other elements that we'll talk through today. I also wanted to point out that in addition to being first to 5G, we also were first to launch mobile access edge compute. And we've specifically launched our partnership with AWS. When we talk about wonderful, great partnerships that help to accelerate the future, we call this Verizon 5G Edge. And we believe that this will be a monumental step function to accelerate the already awesome benefits of 5G as we look at multi-access edge compute. So with that, let's talk about some of the extra flavors that you get with 5G that most others maybe aren't aware of. We like to frame these as 8 currencies, which you see indicated by this wonderful pizza pie slice kind of here on the right. And I wanted to maybe call your attention to some of the additional currencies or attributes. It's a brand new spectrum. It's a brand new deployment. This isn't our normal way of doing things. And so with that, there are inherent benefits to our millimeter wave technology. In addition, again, to massive, massive speeds and throughput, I also wanted to highlight some of the connectivity components. Our connectivity through 5G will maintain stickiness. You'll be able to maintain that connection at over 300 miles per hour. This is mind-blowing. When you think about some of those kind of verticals that Satish put up and the opportunities that we have to really create the next future, we believe that that connectivity speed and that mobility complex will be massive. In addition to that, we also see that our devices will have the potential to have up to 10x battery life by offboarding compute functions that currently exist within drones and robots and heavy machinery and other highly exhausted kind of device structures, offboarding those components to the network. Why? Because you have ultimate reliability, you have the safety and security that is required for a network to support those command control functions, and you have all of these other elements in terms of data throughput, number of connected devices, et cetera, that can be maintained. But I think the one that I'm most excited about is ultra low latency. So when I introduce the concept around multi-access edge compute, this is where this comes into play. I think a lot of us have a hard time kind of contextualizing how fast is fast. But when we look at end-to-end latency of 5 milliseconds or less, that is 100 times faster than the blink of an eye. I remember 10 years ago when we would talk about real time, it was like within 5 minutes or less. Now we're really talking about the real time of ultra low latency. So I could go on and on and on about 5G and its benefits, but Satish, maybe I'll turn it over to you to kick it off for today.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to go quicker with the unmute button there, but thank you, Elise, for that kickoff. And we will have more time to talk about and get more specifics in the industry applications. And so I'd love to first introduce the panel. And so Cody, if you could bring them up, I'd first like to start with Myron Burke. There you go. So Myron has spent a lot of time in the manufacturing and retail space. And so Myron, if you could give a quick 20, 30 seconds intro of yourself.
Sure. Good morning. Good afternoon, I guess. I'm remote today because doing the World Series, so forgive me for my delay. Myron Burke, I spent 25 years with Walmart, about 20 of that in emerging technology. The last 4 years of my career leading at a sector of store number 8, looking at Horizon 2 technologies and computer vision, robotics, and wireless data and power. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Myron. And next, Miriam Eaves from BP Launchpad. Miriam?
Hi, everyone. So Miriam Eaves, I actually grew up in the New York tech ecosystem, spent 25 years there, working with a lot of series of startups, and so saw a lot of technology change come out of New York and applied to many industries. Got involved with BP's venture group about 3 years ago in New York, and then came across the pond about a year ago to join Launchpad, which is a private equity / accelerator at BP. And we're building low carbon energy companies and helping BP achieve its net zero ambition, which is to supply the world's energy reliably, safely, and in as low carbon way as possible.
Thanks, Miriam. And finally, Jiren Park, CEO of Ghost Robotics.
And CEO of Ghost Robotics. We develop industrial legged robots, or we like to simplify it to mobile IoT platforms. I've spent 30 years in product management, business development, and market development for early and growth stage technology businesses, primarily software. And so this is my first foray into hardware.
Awesome. So it's great having everybody aboard. And so I'm going to turn back to Elise. Elise, you gave a great overview of the 5G currencies and sort of at a platform level, what the opportunities are across so many different spaces, 4 of which we're covering in the studio we're doing together with Verizon. Our panelists represent application areas. They've worked in industries for quite some time. They've seen the transformations from a digital perspective, what connectivity means for their industries. And so I'm going to pick one. Let's start with manufacturing, and then Myron, I'm going to turn to you next. After that, it'll be open. But at least, you know, when you're thinking about when Verizon's building the foundations of what 5G infrastructure could mean for the United States, what are you excited about in terms of manufacturing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And generally speaking, I'm excited about a whole lot of things. But when I think maybe I would reframe your question a little bit to think about Verizon doesn't just build the infrastructure. So clearly we're doing that. We're laying all of the groundwork for the connectivity. But in addition to that, and specifically related to manufacturing, I think about all of those amazing orchestration pieces of software that sit on top of it. When you think about technology, 5G is really a capability. It's not a use case. It's not a business in and of itself, if you will. It's kind of what you do with it. So relative to manufacturing, I think about the world today and how we're all kind of prepping and driving towards, particularly in these really interesting COVID times, towards industrial automation and Industry 4.0. And so today I see applications that are very kind of single focused, one pilot to one drone, one kind of single form function robot that does one thing really well. What we see in terms of a 5G opportunity is broader based software orchestration for massive heterogeneous fleets to begin to operate together, both with fixed and movable assets, terrestrial and aerial, human and machine, kind of again, all orchestrating together. I think about an opportunity for beyond visual line of sight and for your everyday kind of average worker to be able to deploy hundreds or thousands of drones in the sky. I think about warehouses and manufacturers being able to automate their industry with using specialty robotics from, safety and cleaning to discrete kind of functions to pallet movers, et cetera. Again, kind of all orchestrated using software that leverages each of those different currencies that we talked about before. Again, when I think about security is a huge notion of that. How do we ensure that the more things that are connected, we have kind of that tight ecosystem around cybersecurity for both physical and digital? There's a whole host of kind of things in there. I know we've got some unbelievable folks joining me here on the panel, but those are some of the quick things that kind of come to mind when I think about 5G and manufacturing.
Yeah, and really, that's right. Really building the 5G ecosystem around these massive industries is where this is going. And Myron, when you and I talked, we talked about how you could bifurcate some of this between machine to machine versus machine to people. And so if you're thinking about machine to people, let's say, on your end, where do you see the worker being affected? Where do you see sort of the autonomy and the worker working together to kind of create new efficiencies and new opportunities? Where you?
Yeah. No, I think 5G gives us a step change in moving from, people to people and people to machine sort of data interfaces where I have an edge compute device, I scan something, I get information back, and then I have to make another decision. So we can actually start to move to where people feed an aspect to a machine, the machine can actually do multiple tasks behind that. And then machines actually bringing work to people as well. We think about collaborative robotics, and we have robots now starting to collect data in stores and do different things, data in warehouses. But now they can talk to a tug that could actually bring the missing items out to the floor, or pick those items from a location in a warehouse, or do the location audits in near real time. So they're collaborative together. They're fixing issues while they're in that location. And then where something can't be done by a collaborative robot service, then you're pulling a human in for that exception management piece. And you start to get a lot more supervisory oversight for the type of work that people don't want to do anymore, that you can offload to machines. And you can put people into more judgmental decisionary factors of the business. I think you also start to shrink supply chains in moving to more machine, because you have edge compute, you can source raw materials, you can find inventory, whether that's a last mile item and what's the most efficient way to get it to that customer, know what services are available and get them there, and do multi-route and pooling of logistics services and manufacturing services as well. So I think it opens a big gateway for the as a service business models that we've started to see teased out in the last few years. But it gives us a level of reliability that we've never had before. And the offload of edge compute takes a lot of functionality out of people's hands and out of back offices and puts it in a live environment. And that's a big trust gap that we can close as well.
That's great. Jiren, I think I'm going to turn to you, because I think I picked up on something there that I believe you're actually building yourself for exactly that need. It's moving the trust from the person to the machine, empowering the person to be more of a decision maker, and letting the product, the robot, operate in, let's say, these harsh environments in a more automated fashion. This is what Ghost Robotics is doing. And so perhaps you can share a bit more of what you're seeing as you try to pivot your product into certain spaces, and how 5G might be part of that roadmap.
Yeah. So most of our business over the last 3 years since we launched the company has been military, public safety, and intel. And they have their own set of standards for radios. And a lot of these are obviously quite expensive and esoteric and very exotic. And so now we just started moving into enterprise. And, people say we build this really complex electromechanical robotic platform. It's got legs. It's pretty cool. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a mobile IoT platform. So basically all it does is connect sensors through a radio and collect data. And so the challenge we're having when we're moving into enterprise is having bandwidth, right? So every robot has a bandwidth issue. And so everybody will take the 5G bandwidth and be very happy with it. But we have other challenges, safety, for example. If you're having dozens of these robots working around people, safety is a big challenge. And the way we control these robots remotely, the biggest challenge we have is latency, right? There's always a man in the middle in these robotic platforms. So if you can imagine these legged robots walking around an industrial plant, a half a dozen of them are taking data readings. Other ones are very specific, and they might have sensors there that are sensing the heat from a bearing to understand whether it needs to be replaced or not. Others are connecting to work order systems. Others are doing kind of telepresence, especially with COVID now, having experts from all around the world being able to do this remotely. The bandwidth is great, but we have other challenges. The ultimate challenge is really cobotting, right? Having all of these robots connected to fixed sensors, connected to humans, connected to systems. And frankly, everybody's running around. There's a real challenge here of safety. So latency is an issue. Security is a fundamental constraint on some of the existing mobile platforms. And we just don't see an enterprise that says, you know what, we're going to put in one type of network modality for robots. We're going to use another one for data. We're going to use another one for communications. I mean, ultimately, they need to move to one cohesive platform. So, 5G kind of gives you that reality where you can connect to everything and everything in a plant.
That's great. That's really interesting. And I think part of that is also, I'm going back to you, Myron, and Miriam, I think there's parallels when it comes to energy distribution as well, is is we touched on, at least, and both Miriam mentioned, the idea of shrinking supply chains as well. We've seen this with sort of the COVID kind of challenges we've had is localizing supply chains and being able to get things that are more custom and or more rapid. Myron, if you were to think about what's the sort of most optimal way to do something like this, is at the manufacturing level, is it at the delivery segment, and where do you see 5G? Which one would you prioritize, and where's 5G sort of playing a role in that?
Yeah, and I'll build off of what Jaron said. I think where you sort of have safety and is pinnacle in all manufacturing retail environments. I think as you back down from there, what's prominent in the world today is speed. We are sacrificing decisions around accuracy in some cases, not healthcare and things, but in some cases in the retail manufacturing, speed is trumping accuracy in a lot of cases. And then we follow the third point of the triangle with accuracy. And so I think we start working from the edge or the end of that supply chain backwards. So sort of the last mile has become so critically important, especially with COVID, spikes in delivery, spikes in pickup, spikes in on-location type access, which has changed the life cycle. We start working backwards and taking bigger steps into that. And I think we work backwards because when you're closer to the customer, you're able to make a more satisfactory change and get results faster. And I think sort of the mobile compute, phone, Apple, Samsung model taught us this of skipping industrial. And then you're able to make a better decision for the massive capital investment in industrial. If you start at the industrial end and work down, you go build this massive infrastructure and change, and then you realize when you get to the end, I didn't need all of that, or I made a big misstep, and I've sunk a lot of money up front into that. So I think we'll see it moving backwards through the environment with consumer devices, consumer edge devices, a lot of things with lick and stick type sensors and IoT, compute on the edge, really changing what we need from both energy and computer processing in devices and in network to speed up the entire access of product in the world.
So access and product spikes. Miriam, I feel like there are parallels in the energy side. Do you see where the gaps that you think innovation should support investment, especially 5G enabled sort of technology?
Well, yeah, I mean the energy industry is completely being transformed, right? And so whatever you think about hydrocarbons, they're going to be around for a while. So the big push now is to get them out of the ground more efficiently. And you do that by IoT, you do it by, having, connecting people around the world, bringing experts around the world. We have several companies in Launchpad that are using fiber optic to collect massive amounts of data to optimize production. Well, you got to have real time, processing of that. And that's where 5G comes into that. And we have a big offshore, BP has big offshore operations, and we're looking at 3D printing. So rather than having to have an inventory of critical parts on the rig, then you can zip it out there in 3 seconds, which is important on when you're looking at production operations. And in terms of safety, listen, nobody knows about that better than BP after what happened. So that is literally at the top of every single conversation we talk about. And then on the robotics side, we're looking at not only industrial applications, we're looking at it in our retail operations, which are big and being 18,000 around the world being transformed. And every time I go into a BP petrol station in London, I think, oh, these poor people, they're working during COVID, right? And wouldn't it be nice if they had a robot that could, take the money and do whatever, because that's where we're going. So we're transforming some of those. But I think the application, the use cases will continue to grow in this industry, which the energy industry, as much as financial industry, is a huge consumer of data, networks, global operations. So they're going to take advantage of best available technology as rapidly as it makes sense. And we also have huge AI. And we're looking at that, applying that across all our operations, whether it's the production side or the renewable energy side, the wind side, the biomass production. We're kind of in all parts of it all around the world. So 5G is going to enable us to do things faster and better, I think.
So Satish, we have a number of audience questions rolling in, and this one touches really all of the industries. So what are the 5G infrastructure deployment challenges and expected timing? So I guess both generally and for each of these industries that we've talked about.
I think at least
maybe I'll take a stab at that one. From an infrastructure perspective, depending on the type of spectrum, because it is a very different spectrum than the 4G spectrum, there are some, again, kind of unique challenges that we have there that we're working through. It's a brand new technology, as you guys know. So thinking about the 5G signal doesn't propagate nearly as far as a 4G signal. So having repeaters or small cells distributed on a more frequent basis for densification is going to be a larger kind of infrastructure kind of play and moves that we need to make. And that's what we're doing, again, kind of on a daily basis to densify in these 35 cities that we've already launched. We should be standing at the ready for the future cities there. But I do think that that brings about kind of some unique challenges as we think about how do you bring this benefit to the right places while also kind of honoring the fixtures required for kind of small cell deployment. How do we think creatively about renewable energy consumption there and being smart about the way that we deploy? So from an infrastructure deployment perspective, you know, that's a little bit about some of the things that we're talking about and really thinking smartly about how do we do that, you know, to the best accord.
Sharon, I think that's a great follow-up for you. At least just talking about, you know, there's, as someone's building a mobile IoT product, you must have customer segments that are looking at 5G now versus others. Maybe it's further down the road for them. So what are you seeing? What are your customers telling you as you're trying to deliver these types of automation systems, monitoring systems, and security systems?
Yeah, so the first three segments we're getting interest for a legged robot, and for folks of you that have not seen, you know, any of the robot videos from Boston Dynamics, which has been doing this for 25 years with a fairly nice legged robot generic platform. We built a very hardened, durable industrial platform, you know, that'll withstand, you know, any type of temperature and environmental condition. And, by next year, it'll be actually swimming in water. It'll be completely sealed. So you think about how we designed that robot, and then you think about the industries that are going to match to it. So one is energy. Energy markets are critical, right? Extraction markets, that includes mining. We talk about very large-scale manufacturers that have automated much of their enterprise, you know, their facilities, very large-scale plants where they've installed lots of fixed sensors over the last 5 years, plus years. And now they're saying, what else can we automate? They need to move to mobile sensors now. So we kind of work with those types of environments and industries. You think a lot about consumer packaged goods. You think about anything that's very, very large scale type of industrial manufacturing. And then construction. Construction is a huge market. And so what are they saying? You know, a lot of the places we take a lot of these things for granted. Things are manufactured. And we say, God, these guys must have a really sophisticated manufacturing base to do this. You know, communication sometimes is not so sophisticated in these facilities. Right. And they'll have a certain network for each type of use case. And so they're very open to moving to 5G. So it's almost not just our legged robot that's going to move them forward to automation. It's actually a combination of the communications team saying, hey, let's put in 5G. What can we do with that? And we're like, hey, if you have 5G, we could actually put dozens of robots that are going to be very safe and do very committed tasks around your plant. So it's kind of an aggregated mix of folks coming from different sides. And also you have the software guys, right? The IT and the CFO's office that's saying, hey, we need to cut costs and we need to create work orders that are fully automated. So it's kind of good timing. And frankly, COVID doesn't hurt. COVID has kind of helped push a lot of our opportunities in the forefront. And certainly we're thankful for that. We'll take every silver lining we can as a startup. So.
Yeah, Satish, just one quick summary on the end of that. I think the evolution of 5G and the infrastructure deployment of that, I know Lee said there are 35 cities and they're leading, going into more and more as fast as they can. So we have to be patient as a society a little bit because it's a big build. But I think it's going to make all of us smarter about network spectrums and how we use those. And we'll put the advanced automation and compute in this 5G, and I think really lean into that because we need the speed and the security and the lack of latency in that. And then there's other things like low band IoT where it's like, I may not need everything off of a trailer in near real time. I may need that 30-mile connectivity. And I think we'll be much smarter about how we use networks than we ever have been in the past. And that will make all of the network spectrum work better. So I think 5G gives us an elevation lift in how we look at network spectrum, not just across the US, but across the world.
I love that.
Yep.
I think it's like another tool in the tool belt, if you think about it. One of the other things I wanted to comment on, because Jaren's brought it up a couple times, is the notion of network slicing. So today, customers have one network for one thing, one network for another thing, because they need to know that that network is doing the one thing and they're doing that one thing really, really well. When you look at spectrum possibility and beamforming in general, we now have the opportunity to slice the network for dedicated slices. So Jaren and his team will have dedicated slices of the network specifically to support the unique needs of robotics, as an example, versus others that are specific just for cyber or for drone operations or for other kind of massive IoT kind of connected devices. And this, again, to Myron's point, gives us ultra flexibility in terms of what's the right tool for the right job and potentially the combination of elements that will be required in order to kind of excel this kind of automation journey forward.
Elise, I'm going to stay with you there. I think what Jaren and Myron, what you've just said, I think kind of leads into the next part of what we were hoping to talk about, which is the idea of collaboration. And so with Verizon building out this 5G ecosystem, with Myron living the application side and how industries implement, and Jaren trying to develop new products, Jaren talked about different teams coming together to understand 5G, communications teams, along with the people building the hardware. Myron's talking about learning how to use network properly. This to me is right for collaboration. So I'd love to hear your view. Clearly, this is what the studio is about as well, but like, how is Verizon looking at this from an industry collaboration perspective? And we'll talk about industry startup after that. And then Miriam, I'd like to point to you next after this.
Yeah, I think collaboration is massively important. We think we have a lot of really great ideas, and some of them are not great. And the best way that you do that is by shimmying up to others to say, hey, let's try all this, let's test it together, and let's learn alongside one another. I think Verizon does this in a few different ways. And we do it with kind of extreme intention, because if you don't know what you need and you don't know what you want out of it, you know, sometimes it just becomes like a little bit of a party, which everybody loves a great party. But if we're not driving towards those results and those businesses and the revenue and the action, you know, then maybe we had a great sushi dinner and a good cocktail, and that's kind of calling it a day. So we do it in a couple different ways. The first and probably most prominently is the work that we do through our 5G labs. So we have 6 established labs around the world, and they have very discrete focuses in public sector and in IT and in first responder notions, et cetera. And those are collaboration spaces for people to come to kind of bang around on the network, kind of trial a couple things, meet with others, et cetera. The second way that we do it is we engage our massive partner network. So as you think about the global business that is Verizon, our strategic partnerships, our university programs, and some of the other cohorts that we've established for kind of joint sharing to advance causes together, our work with industry bodies, et cetera. And then I think there's a third category, and that's the work that we're doing with Newlab, which to me is a category in and of itself. It's not just saying kind of, hey, come and play. It's saying, we know where we want to place bets. We know the businesses that we're investing in. We want to create a curated set of entrepreneurs using the amazing resources from Newlab to kind of come together to say, we're going to roll up our sleeves together. We want to collaboratively build these businesses for the future and figure out what new go-to-market channels look like, what new commercial models, what's the new tech and IP, and how do we customize kind of our network to fit those specific needs. So to me, it kind of takes, hey, let's have a set of ideas versus let's decide that we're going to build business together. And that's some of the unique work that we're trying out here with our partnership with Newlab.
So Lisa, I'm going to stay with you on that. What worries, and this is going to turn into startups, and Miriam, I'm coming to you next on this. Like, what are your fears, or what worries you when it comes like to sort of, I 100% agree, placing bets is important, but we are working with startups. These companies are really trying to be agile. They're trying to be experimental. They're really pushing the envelope. What is a worry you have perhaps with that? We know what's exciting.
Yeah, I think the number one worry that I have, and that I would encourage all of your partners and startups to really think about, is what we don't need in this world is another amazing technology searching for a problem. If we are not first at what is the customer pain point and how are we thinking about the problems and the friction points, if we don't start there, then we've got a little bit of a problem on our hands. And so we see a lot of like, hey, look at my new whiz bang thing. I developed this great piece of tech. We're like, awesome. Why? Whose life are you making easier, more efficient, faster, better, smarter? And I think if we reframe that and really think strategically about what that customer pain point is, that almost always leads into better business. But I think we've all seen the vast majority of startups kind of fall by the wayside because they've got this brilliant tech, but either nobody needs it, there's no willingness to pay, and there's no great business there. So I think with this kind of paired approach that we have with Newlab, we're pre-vetting the strategy, bringing that to the table and saying, okay, great. We know what the customer pain points are. We need further validation. We need real life tech to kind of partner together and build that business moving forward.
Yeah, that's great.
Satish, I want to echo that. I'm sorry to jump in. I know we're trying to, but I want to echo that because the success I had at Walmart and was store number 8 before I started Divergent was all about that partnership in a lab. We have a lab, show us your really cool tech. You know, we were looking at Horizon 2 stuff that really wasn't scalable, but we brought it in, we would set it up in partnership, and we shared those labs, we were working together. And then you brought in business people and said, what do you think? We can go from A to Z or A to X or A to G. And the first question was always, help me figure out where this is going to start to pay for itself. And then we can get from A to B to C to G to X over the discerned amount of time. But we have to be able to show where that stuff starts to earn its keep. And it's so good to hear a technology leading company and Elise and the incubator side she runs to be able to talk about that, because I think that's the key to success in this space is sharing labs, proof of concepts together, and really building out those minimal viable use cases to say there's a low enough risk on a long-term tech that's transformational for a business leader to take the risk on the P&L. And that's a critical operational decision that has to come through in these things.
Well, that's actually what Launchpad is, because we are a step in the journey of innovation to basically use new technologies to enable BP's both low carbon businesses, building low carbon businesses, as well as creating maximum efficiencies in the core business. So the question we ask ourselves, in addition to all the questions you ask about a startup is there a unique advantage that BP can bring to this particular startup to help it scale at speed? And that means it's solving a big problem for us. And it's solving a big problem for us. There's a big market for the problem it can solve because a lot of money spent in this particular industry. So we have a company that is doing this fiber optic data processing, and it is a Launchpad company, which means it's majority owned, but it is selling to BP's competitors because it's about enabling startups to grow, and it's also about bringing solutions to the industry as well. And then if you look at the oil industry or the energy as a whole, OGCI, which is a big consortium of 11 of the companies, are committed to, today they announced a commitment to reducing carbon emissions that was pretty aggressive. The big problem they're trying to solve is methane, which has huge applications for 5G because methane is everywhere. And how do you find it? You find it through drones and IoT. And then how do you figure out what to do with it in real time so you can stop it? So that's, we're collaborating as we can. We collaborate with our colleagues on this side of the pond for sure, but it's shared problems. And so we're working together to understand technology solutions and share them for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jaren, I want to bring it over to you and kind of come back to the 5G perspective. I mean, you're definitely a mature company, a startup, but you are a mature startup. You have products in market, you have use cases and challenges, but you're talking to folks like Myron and Miriam, who are the problem owners. These industries own these problems that are the sort of the bedrock of society, and you've got Elise and Verizon building out this entire ecosystem that can support it. So for 5G, like as a startup, like what is the type of engagement you would hope for? Of course, being a customer is one way, but to get you there, what is the type of engagements you look for from large industry?
Yeah, so I mean, when we started talking late last year, there was excitement around the legged robot, and I think this happens with a lot of industries. Like, we love this, Okay, what are we going to do with it? And so we're just kind of a walking IoT platform, walking server, right? We've got legs on it. And the next thing is you need some software applications, right? You need AI. You need other types of applications that are doing some sort of enterprise, some processing, data analytics, and so forth. And you've had the sensor and the radio. And so ultimately, we're one piece in the puzzle. When we go out to a construction site, so forth, we had a conversation yesterday with a very, very large construction company. And I don't think they'll mind us mentioning it. It's Haskell Construction, very large construction company out of Jacksonville, Florida. And they're just doing amazing things. And so they're like, okay, you've got a nice robot what are we going to do and how are we going to put this together? So, we throw out ideas like, wouldn't it be great if it was working on 5G and we could take this software and capture digital twin data, transport that information, process it at the edge, and then trickle some of that and make some decision making, and maybe we can reduce 20 hours a week, 40 hours a week, and then maybe we can scale that. So that's how we typically look at the problem. So our first question is, somebody can ship me software, I can get a sensor, what do I do about a 5G network? So the fact that you guys are putting this 5G network, the timing was perfect, right? We've got some customers that are coming up in the fourth quarter, one of many. We now test out this platform, the software on your network in your lab. We've got some validation, we've got some data, and hopefully we can bag and come back and use it again for additional applications for customers. So we need kind of that type of ecosystem. And ultimately, even though we're successful right now as a startup, it's always complex with a money issue, right? So if we have partners like this to do this, and Verizon has a great brand, and certainly that's very helpful as they work with Newlab, New York City, which is not far from our offices.
Right. We have a few questions coming in, and this one's pretty interesting on how to plan for, I guess, things that can go wrong in this new network, especially for consumers that have 5G is a bit mysterious to them still. So what protocols are in place, or how do we plan for hack attacks if you're operating a fleet of vehicles that are working together?
Yeah, and I'll broaden that a bit. Like security, I think resiliency kind of go together, right? So especially when you're talking about energy maintenance and autonomous vehicles. So at least maybe you can start with that.
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. When we start thinking about kind of cyber specifically in this current world, and then you now add on an additional 1 million or more connected devices per square kilometer that can be addressed with a single network slice, all of a sudden you've got kind of an exponential potential disaster or problem on your hand, or you have a great opportunity. And so when we go back to kind of those 8 currencies, that reliability and resiliency that Satish is talking about is absolutely mission critical. So in addition to our investments here, we're also making additional investments for 5G based and low latency compute, our MEC compute, security products and services that actually live right there on the cellular edge. So before it ever touches the public internet, we've got kind of protocols that are in place and are actively looking for phenomenal companies to kind of help us think creatively about how we do that. So that's my kind of call out there. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, what I would also say is that for a lot of the use cases that we're talking about here, whether it's industrial automation or it's warehousing or supply chain, et cetera, many of these components and implementations are also available in our private networking function, which means it never touches the public internet. These are private lines, dedicated lines as well. So there are many built-in components that are actually built into the 5G global standard, kind of care for some of these components. It will never be enough. We will always want to kind of be 1, 2, 5, 10 steps ahead of the nefarious actors that are out there. It's new, it's fresh, we're working on it, but we do have many of those protocols kind of built in place to help keep those on our network super safe.
Jaren, I think that's music to your ears, but I'll pop over to Miriam first. Miriam, when it comes to energy security, this wasn't supposed to be a topic, but I think it is a great question. Hearing what Elise just said, how do you look at, is BP launched by looking at innovation around energy security and how you keep things resilient?
Billy, as I said, it is the number 1 priority of BP. I mean, $17 billion fine from Deepwater Horizon will make it religion. It is where we start every single conversation. So were we to, any kind of network, whatever it is, and people scream because our cybersecurity, our walls are so tough. Launchpad had to fight to get slightly smaller risk cybersecurity for our startups who were like, seriously, what is this? It's not the military, but it is to us. So, it needs to be assured. That's all I can say. It needs to be assured. It needs to be reliable. It needs to we need to absolutely know that it's not going to, the helicopters are going to crash in the middle of the ocean. They're not going to hack, whatever operations and cause another Deepwater Horizon or whatever it is. So it is absolutely number 1. And, certainly working with a global provider like Verizon, you should come to the UK, by the way. There was a big announcement there yesterday.
Sure, can we make that decision?
No, we would work with a big, BP is going to work with a big global provider like Verizon that can guarantee as much as our systems can, but it's paramount for sure.
Yeah, that's a call to action from across the ocean there for you.
Very well noted. We have unbelievable partners and suppliers talking about our ecosystem that will be happy to support you, Miriam. So we'll have a cup of tea. We'll talk about that one.
Could we?
Yeah. But Jared and Myron, I mean, this must be it's a low. I imagine if the 5G was assured to be secure and resilient as Miriam is hoping it will be and Elise is saying it will be, that must be a load off your minds, right, in terms of what you need to develop, and Myron, what you need to implement in your industry. So Jared, I was hoping you could follow up a little bit.
So
building your product.
we think about like the risks on robots. There's two. There's physical risk, somebody getting hurt. There's also reputational risk, and that reputational risk is big. Let's say a robot is delivering packages or something, and some kid is bound to kick it in a neighborhood. Something's going to happen, right? And the only thing to prevent that physical risk and reputational risk is a man in the middle, and some sort of programmatic or algorithmic control that says, "Hey, stop what you're doing." That requires low latency, right, in this network that can't be hacked. And then, of course, there's the man in the middle. My reaction to, hey, by the way, my God, my robot's doing something horrible in that plant. I got to hit the red button, right? And ultimately, years ago, I used to sell telco platforms, and I met the Verizon CTO can't even remember his name, a really nice guy. And he goes, "Do you know how many people try to hack into my freaking network every day?" And people don't realize that. Like, we make billions of cell phone calls daily, and we don't realize like these big networks like Verizon, Telefonica, whoever it is, the amount of folks that are trying to hack into these networks. And this is their job day in, day out to make sure their systems don't get hacked into. I'd rather rely on Verizon running even the Wi-Fi network here than me personally running it and hiring a cyber expert. And so I think this is good generally overall for all types of machines, IoT, human-to-human conversation, whatever it is. Having these large-scale companies run everything, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, and Myron, I imagine you must have had blockers, things you wish you could have implemented if only they were secure and assured to be resilient and things like that.
Yeah, and large companies have a tremendous risk profile for security. And part of it is, it's not just about the trust from the consumer and losing that trust. It's the data that you take in and you store and you allow these automated transactions and delivery services and all these things that are growing in the marketplace. And so there's a tremendous amount of concern around risk, about financial risk, about brand risk, about market share and consumer trust risk. And so I think being able to say, hey, we can offload some of the risk in our service level agreements to companies like Verizon, because they're bringing this technology forward, they can bring greater guarantees of security forward than we've had, allows the companies to look a little further out and how they do a better job and probably take some mass away from a retailer like a Walmart or a Target or any of the large manufacturer services groups in that space. And hopefully out of that, we raise the tide for all ships, and that everybody gets a better level of service. Everybody gets a better level of security. Because one thing we know for sure, the people who are trying to crack security aren't going to go away. And so we have to continue to raise the tide for all ships to make it a better operating environment and keep commerce moving forward.
Totally. That's great.
So we have another audience question that might be interesting across industries, and that's around what is the 5-year profit for consumers with this benefit? Because we've talked a lot about how this affects businesses, but what does it look like for the consumer to get excited about how they can benefit in that way?
Please.
Maybe I'll take the first stab at that one. There's so many things. I want to be clear that we think that actually from an application perspective and kind of moving the needle to fundamentally change the world, we believe that most of that revolution will happen on the business side from a size and opportunity perspective, because our 4G LTE network is pretty awesome. So the capital that we're spending, anywhere between $17 to $18 billion a year to upgrade our infrastructure, is also both going to kind of further densify our 4G LTE network and continue to fine tune that. But what I will say is some of the most exciting stuff that we're doing is around telemedicine and telehealth. So we have some unbelievable partnerships around remote health, remote surgery, kind of options as you think about the ability to get unbelievable care potentially anywhere in the world that is easily accessible to all of the communities that we know need it. That's one big piece. The second is all things entertainment. I mean, we wouldn't really be talking about 5G if we didn't talk about a little razzle dazzle. And so when I think about augmented and virtual reality, especially right now, my ability to go attend like a Justin Timberlake concert or Beyonce or whatever, and to do that from the safety and the sanctity of my own home in my pajamas, but to feel like I'm a part of the rave and crack my glow stick, I'm in on that. Or the ability to like sit in at my live NFL game and the amazing partnership that we have with the NFL, to kind of think about how do I feel like I'm a part of the game and really immersive in there, so that my experiences are in real time, so that when my buddies who are there at the game are texting me or tweeting that they just saw that play, I experienced it in the same moment. And so I think about just a couple of these things, both on the deeply personal side, as well as the way that we love to seek entertainment, especially relative to COVID. There are many, many things for consumers to get excited about. And then there's a whole host of things that like are still waiting to be dreamed up. 10 years ago, you would have never thought about getting into a car with a stranger and having them take you to your home or to the airport. And now it's kind of commonplace. You're staying in somebody else's home whom you've never met. We imagine that there will be many other kind of consumer applications to come as well.
But if you, on the energy side, if you look at things like, connected homes and being able to manage the prosumer, we talk about the prosumer, where you're basically, it's happening in the energy industry, what happened in the media industry 10, 20 years ago, when all of a sudden the consumer dictated what they watched, when they watched it, how they watched it. Well, it's happening in the energy industry. You're going to have a choice of your source of electrons or hydrocarbons. You're going to have a choice of how, from wherever you are, reacting to events that might change your energy footprint, because you have the data. You can do it automated, you can do it yourself. You can figure out the optimal time to charge your car or to do your dishwashing. All that stuff is driven by IoT data, connectivity. It all goes back to that. And we have companies that are, working in different parts of the collecting data for homes, for C&I businesses, which is a huge consumer of energy in cities. We also have created a new group that is basically bringing smart city solutions together, because if you look across the whole of BP, we've got about 20 different enterprises that can enable various aspects of smart city, and it's all driven by connectivity. So the better connectivity you have, the faster, the more efficient those solutions will be for the consumers to get where they want to go most efficiently with the least carbon, or what manage your home, or whatever it is. So there's lots of applications in the energy industry for consumers.
Yeah, I was going to say. I was going to stay on consumers. Myron, what's this going to do to retail? What's the future that 5G is going to enable for retail?
Well, I think in retail you'll see a lot of it in the workforce application side of that, and that'll kind of be the beta test that says, hey, can our workforce adopt this? Can they use it? Is it intuitive? Can we move our native apps forward in the right way? And I think we've learned a lot about that over the last few years. COVID is going to force, I think, a collision between this technology curve and the services curve that people are looking for. And I think that's going to create a bit of a big bang theory in what retail of the future will look like. And there's a lot of speculation, but none of us are going too far out on the limb, because there's a lot of legacy stuff still left to be converted. So I think 5G helps a lot in some of that legacy conversion, because we do have the trust, we do have the network infrastructure and the reliability to do things that we think we'll be able to do, but we haven't put the proof out there yet. So I think that's going to be a big change. I think in addition to that, because of how retail works with full-time, part-time jobs and a lot of open hours, which we're all reduced right now, it's going to bleed over. And I think there was a comment about this that just flashed up about how schools and community services work, and the ability to have remote video classes in a lot of different locations, remote teaching of smaller classes and breaking those things apart. and I think that's important because that goes with retail and making it easier on the working family, on the single moms and dads who are out there. And even babysitting or daycare services might take on a different role of sort of surrogate school type scenarios, because they can get teaching into the facilities and dedicate time for that because you have good networks, good performance, security, and low latency. So I think those two work together to really make the work-life balance become more harmonious across lifestyle and work style.
I off simultaneously 2 other audience questions, so thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and I think the worker, I think we talked about that a bit, is how a lot of the 5G sort of enabled innovation can help workers sort of perform at a higher level, right? And so avoid harsh environments, avoid longer hours, as you said, Myron, and then Elise talked about, you know, how it changes the way you live in your home. Jaren, what does this mean for inventors, the next generation of engineers and talent and folks that are trying to create the next generation of products? Ghost is still there. Ghost is still developing new devices themselves. What is this playground looking like to you? And what would you say to like the next generation of founders and startups?
Yeah, you can date me, but I used to replace dish packs, digital equipment dish packs, hard drives. They look like a washing machine. It was like 100 megabytes, you know, and you paid an extra 20 grand and we flipped a switch on the back and it went to, I don't know, doubled the amount. It was just crazy, right? And we could never have enough storage. We could never have enough bandwidth. So you're never going to have enough bandwidth, right? That ultimately, we're always going to say it's never enough. So these sensors are capturing so much data. Anybody here, we're at Pennovation campus, University of Pennsylvania. There's a dozen great startups in our campus here. And what are the first things they need outside of money is really bandwidth, right? They're always asking for bandwidth. So when you're experimenting with robots, and going back to that question of consumer, like robots, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. I mean, the density of robots right now, robotic systems, is tiny. You're talking about a vacuum cleaner and maybe a couple test autonomous vehicles going by. But think about everything from your Uber to your personal car to household robots to delivery robots. I mean, you're talking about such a densely packed environment. And while we're focused on industrial and military segments, there's this massive amount of opportunity in robotics and consumers, right? We don't do that, but there's a ton of entrepreneurs that are going to come out with some amazing things, cooking robots, ironing robots, and the density of robots is going to be so amazing. And I think that's where bandwidth is going to be critical. Without bandwidth, it's like that Apollo 13 movie, you know, energy is everything, right? Bandwidth ultimately is everything to control these robots and systems that communicate back and forth. So I think it's absolutely critical.
I'll just say that as I prepare for the 2020-2021 school year, I could really use a distance learning robot. So Jaren, if you could work on that, that'd be great for my household and my 3 kids. Be great.
I'll have to ask these guys after the legged robot to build the
legged or non-legged, it doesn't even matter. I'll take anything I can get.
Yeah. I need something my kids can ride to school too. That I don't have to drive.
That I can probably give you. That might be the next.
All right.
This has been an incredible panel. This is probably the easiest one I've done. So thank you guys. You guys really carried the show and I really appreciate that. Lots of great knowledge. I think everyone out there learned a lot. Our audience was represented by industries, startups, academics, you name it. I'm excited about the program we're running with Verizon, the 5G studio. I'm excited by all the initiatives you all are working on as well, Myron, Miriam, and Jaren. And I think there's a need here, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity in everything we described. So at least I'm going to leave the last words to you. You know, what do you, a call to action to the inventors out there, a call to action to the industries out there that own the problem sets we're trying to solve. What would you say to the audience as closing remarks?
I mean, I think if I were to one-liner it, I would say giddy up, because the future is now. So the reality is that we're not 5 years out from 5G, it's now, and we need you. The world kind of needs you to help dream and invent and inspire kind of new ways of working, new ways of operating, new ways of efficiency, new ways of learning together. And so alongside kind of all of my partners here, we're just saying yes to kind of open up the opportunity to kind of think really creatively, to really stretch the bounds. We have a brand new spectrum, a brand new type of technology. So we're not just looking at a step function to 4G, it's a fundamentally different approach and a different opportunity. And so whether it's through Newlab or through, you know, any other kind of engagement, I just would encourage you to yes. Yes, lean in, dive in, let's do it. Let's start producing the future because I'm ready and it's coming.
I love it.
It's
That's
definitely getting up to the unicorn, right?
That's right. That's right. And I think you'll be hearing from all of us soon because we're all sort of pushing incredible initiatives currently. So thank you again to the panelists for a great discussion.
Pleasure.
Thank you to the audience for incredibly active Q&A. Tons of questions. I think we got a good amount, but not all of them. So I apologize for that. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you all.